battle, he severs that lifeblood railroad line going into Petersburg, and Lee knows now his position is no longer tenable. He must retreat. He sends a message to President Jefferson Davis and says, get your cabinet together and skedaddle because we are out of here. And on the evening of the 2nd of April, Lee withdraws from those trenches. Now his plan, he sent his supply trains ahead of him to the west. He wants to reunite his army at Amelia Courthouse, resupply his army, and then hang a hard left, go south, hook up with Joe Johnston in North Carolina, take care of Sherman down there before turning his guns north again. Now this is the Einstein plan because it works great in theory, but in practice it's going to be a little dicier. He withdraws on the evening of the 2nd. The army does converge at Amelia Courthouse. There are supplies waiting on him. Munitions, uniforms, medicine. What does an army march on? It's food, it's stomach, right? You can't eat beans, band-aids, bullets. He's got to spend the whole day at Amelia Courthouse foraging for food. And in the end, that is the fatal mistake. That head start he gets, he steals a march by withdrawing in the evening. That head start is gone. Now Grant, he has 3 armies at his disposal. He's going to chase Lee's army with the Army of the Potomac, the same army that won the Battle of Gettysburg. But he's going to send the Army of the Shenandoah and the Army of the James down along that South Side Railroad. So every time Lee stops to supply and looks to go south, guess what? His way is blocked. So he is forced continuously keep marching west, always looking to resupply, always looking to go south. They will be marching every day, sometimes through the night. They will be fighting every day. On April 6th at Sailor's Creek is a pitched battle. Lee will lose almost 8,000 men, 8 generals, 20% of his army gone in one engagement. Lee's miles away when he sees Confederate infantry running through the fields away from the sounds of the guns, and he says, my God, has the army been dissolved? It's a bad day. The next day, Grant figures it's time to open up communications with Lee. He writes him a letter. General Lee, I think that the events of the past week have compelled me to call upon you to surrender your army. Any further effusion of blood will not be on my shoulders. Now remember who Lee is dealing with, right? Because Grant comes into this with a reputation, does he not? U.S. Grant, what's one of his nicknames? Unconditional surrender Grant. So Lee replies, General Grant, I disagree. I don't think that we have reached a state of emergency where I need to surrender my army. So that's not going to happen. But, just out of curiosity, what terms would you offer? And when they were at Petersburg, Lincoln had come down and visited with Grant. And in a meeting, Lincoln gives him his philosophy about accepting the surrender of Confederate forces. Now, he's already alluded to this in his second inaugural. Remember, malice towards none, charity for all. He says, let them up easy. No unnecessary humiliation. But it's going to be hard enough to get this ball of wax put back together. It makes no sense to create even more hard feelings, even more bitterness. Let them up easy. So keeping that guidance in mind, Grant replies, General Lee, if your boys lay down their arms, we will let them go home. No prison camp. They will be paroled. Lee replies, roger that, but we're not done here yet, not by a long shot. By the afternoon of the 8th, the Confederate Army was just to the east of Appomattox Courthouse. Now, why would he be coming to this sleepy little town? That's a trick question. He ain't coming here. He's going 3 miles away. What's 3 miles away? Appomattox Station, a railroad line. There's 4 railroads loaded down with supplies just waiting on him. This is good. However, General Sheridan, the commanding general of the Army of Shenandoah, the North's finest cavalry officer, he finds out about these supplies. He sends Custer out ahead to capture them. On the evening of the 8th, Custer will fight the Battle of Appomattox Station. Now, before we saw the movie, how many of us have ever heard of the Battle of Appomattox Station? Liars. I believe. The speed of this campaign is lightning fast. It is mind-bogglingly fast. Funny things happen when things are happening so quickly. This is the only case in the war where you have cavalry versus artillery. Custer runs into Walker's reserve artillery. They fight the battle. It's touch and go for a while, but Custer will carry the day. Captures 25 guns. He's going to capture 3 out of those 4 supply trains. They are off the table for Lee. He is forced to continue marching west. But there's a problem. Early in the morning, April 9th, there's a brigade of Union cavalry on the rise just outside of town on the west side. Now, this is not such a big problem. I mean, infantry versus cavalry, infantry will carry the day every time. But Sheridan knows something that Lee does not know, and that is that the Army of the James has been marching through the night to get to the field. So he doesn't need to beat him. He just needs to hold him up, delay him, stall him, give that army time to get here. And that's exactly what he's going to do. General Gordon line up his Confederate corps from the bottom of the hill all the way into the tree line. There were no trees there at the time, though. He will wheel left and sweep that cavalry away, and for a while the road is open while they are fighting, but more and more cavalry arrive to the field. And while they are fighting, brigade after brigade of Union infantry begin to file onto the field on the west side of the field. The Army of the James has arrived. 35-mile march, 20 hours to get to that field. Can you even imagine? And at the end of that march, lock and load, boys, here we go. When the Confederates see those thousands and thousands of infantry out there, they know it's over. Before the battle even starts, General Gordon says of his corps, I have fought them to a frazzle. That's what he's starting out with. Cavalry, he can handle. Infantry, no way. They are fought out, they are played out, they haven't been fed. 3 successive night marches to get to Appomattox Courthouse. It is over. Confederate infantry falls through the town, back onto the other side of the Appomattox River. And General Lee knows now it's over. He has no choice now but to surrender. He's got the Army of Potomac, Arnold and Seals on the east, now to the south, the Army of Shenandoah. In front of him now, the Army of the James. And what's to the north besides the north? It's the James River. And it's not one of them creeks around here we like to call rivers. It's an honest-to-gosh river. And in the spring runoff, it's deep, wide, moving fast. There's nobody getting over it. Lee knows he has no choice but to surrender. And that is the only way he would have gotten Lee to surrender. Nobody can fault Lee. He has done everything of your choosing. Appomattox Courthouse is no man's land. It lies between the armies. It makes sense to me. He sends his aide, Charles Marshall, into town to find an appropriate meeting place. The first white man he comes across is Wilmer McLean. He says, Generals Lee and Grant need a place to meet. What do you got? McLean points to a house. Had been abandoned, dilapidated, unfurnished. He says, how about this? Marshall looks at it and says, no, sir, that will not do. What else you got? McLean says, pointing to his own house, I suppose you could do it at my house. Marshall says, done. We will meet there. About 1 o'clock that morning of the 9th, General Lee had put on a brand new uniform. It had just been made in Richmond. He adorns a very fine presentation sword. One of his officers asked the obvious question, General Lee, why are you wearing your finest? General Lee replied, I expect by the end of the day, I will be Grant's prisoner, and I mean to put on a good appearance. Lee arrives about 1 o'clock that afternoon. Now, try and get inside Lee and think of what he might have been feeling at that time. He'd been an officer, he'd been in the military all of his adult life, 38, 39 years. He's been highly, highly successful at everything he's ever put his mind to doing. Remember the New England Patriots when they went to the Super Bowl? Undefeated? And what happened in that last game? Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what's happening for Lee here, isn't it? But this is so much more important than a football game, is it not? He is a man with a temper. Just like some of Virginia's other heroes. George Washington, he had a violent temper. He had been known to, shall we say, speak in tongues from time to time, especially when those Hessians would show up. He's had a really bad week. He's tired, he's hungry, and he's here to do the thing he said he'd rather die 1,000 deaths than do, and that is surrender his army. He shows up here and looks around, and there is no General Grant Grant taking it off in 3 or 4 days, spattered with mud. It's a private's uniform. He just happens to be wearing 3 real shiny silver stars on his shoulder strap, however. But this kind of begs the question, why did he not change over, considering the magnitude of what's going to occur here? That's a fair question. When he receives a message that Lee is ready to surrender, he is riding the lines with Sheridan. He's miles and miles away from his baggage. It would have taken him hours to go back, get cleaned up and changed over, and get back here. He did not want to keep General Lee waiting that long. And besides, you got General Lee saying he's ready to surrender? Man, you better beat feet, get there, get him surrendered before the old man changes his mind, right? But he does not come in blustering, aha, there you are, surrender now. That's not going to happen. Remember, let him up easy. He walks in, they shake hands, and begin small talk. Oh, General Lee, I don't suppose you remember, but we met before during the Mexican War. Lee replies, well, of course I remember you. I love this story, because the way I'm thinking is really, does this pass a straight face test? In the Mexican War, Lee's a captain. A captain in the old army is up there. Lee is a really busy guy in that war. He's a shaker and mover. You think he really remembers some brand new snot-nosed lieutenant? And by the way, aren't all lieutenants snot-nosed? Yes, they are, but I digress. You think he really remembered? I'm thinking, not just no, but probably heck no. But he's gracious. Of course I remember you. They talk about the war. They talk about the campaigns that they were on together, the people that they served with. But you can imagine the angst that Lee is feeling. He's not here for small talk. Finally, he's had enough. He says, not impolitely, I suppose we should get down to business. Would you please write out your terms? Grant replies, yes, I think that would be best. Now they sit down at their tables. Now if you've been in the McLean house, you'll notice 2 tables. One very nice marble top table, and off to the side, a very plain oval table with spindle legs, something you sit out for the kids at Thanksgiving dinner. Who should use a nice table? You would think it would be Grant, right? He's the victor. But no, Lee will use that table. Why? It's 3 good reasons. Number 1, he got there first. You want to pick your chair, get there before the other guy does, right? Number 2, Lee is a senior officer on deck. And number 3, remember, let him up easy. So Grant's not going to walk in there, General Lee, do you mind? No, that's not going to happen. Grant takes out pencil and paper and begins to write out terms. Now this is kind of where, if these men are nervous, here you might see a sign of it. Grant, he's got that cigar and he's smoking like a chimney. He writes out his terms, passes it over to Lee. And here's where you might get a glimpse of Lee's nervousness. He takes out reading glasses, cleans them off, crosses his legs, puts on his reading glasses. Time to find out what's on that piece of paper. Begins reading, and yes, the men will be paroled as agreed upon in prior correspondence. But the second term comes as a surprise. All the officers will be able to keep their horses, baggage, and sidearms. Very generous. And Lee says, this will have a happy effect on my army. Now remember, by the way, remember what Lee's wearing? That beautiful presentation sword? What does a losing general traditionally do? Surrenders his sword. My liege, you bested me. Here you go. That doesn't happen. Why not? Officers can keep their sidearms. It's a nice sword. I think I'll keep it. Whatever the reason, Lee does not offer, Grant does not ask. It simply is not an issue. There's no ego on display here. Considering the magnitude of what is transpiring within those walls, it is a remarkably low-key affair. Officers can keep their horses, baggage, and sidearms. He says this will have a happy effect on my army. But you know, the Confederate Army is different from the Army of the United States. Because in the Confederate Army, all the men own all the animals. Right? If you join the Union Cavalry, you show up, I do solemnly swear, you get your uniforms, get your horses, off you go. You join the Confederate Cavalry, you show up with your horse. All that Confederate artillery is being pulled around by horses supplied by the men who are servicing those guns. He says, my men are farmers. It's the spring planting season. Can they keep their animals? As opposed to Lee, who had been highly successful at everything he had ever done, Grant, on the other hand, before the war, had failed at many things. Well, at least a handful. What was one of those things? He's a hard scrabble farmer. He knows how hard it is to farm. He knows how valuable the animals are. And besides, can I tell you a secret? These animals are starving. They're eating bark off of trees. What's he going to do with them? So he says, yes, generally your men may indeed keep their animals. I will not rewrite the terms, but I will give the verbal order. Your men